What are some ways that churches commonly get deacons wrong? Now, I want to acknowledge something first, and that is that the Bible doesn't say much about deacons. There are a couple of explicit texts, there's one implicit text, and there's a debatable text, but there's not a lot of material to draw from. And because of that, I think we should both pay all the more careful attention to the material we do have, but also treat others who do deacons differently with an extra dose of charity and generosity because, again, Scripture doesn't say a lot about deacons. And yet I think it says enough. What it gives us is spare, but it is sufficient. It gives us enough to know what models of deacons fall short of the Bible's vision. So I'll just mention a few here. In the book, Deacons, How They Serve and Strengthen the Church, I list some fictional characters who represent some deacons who may be not so fictional in your own life. Maybe you will think of specific churches or people when you hear some of these names. So first of all, pastor in training Peter. Pastor in training Peter has been made a deacon because he's on his way to becoming an elder or a pastor. For him, deaconing is just a pit stop to pastoring. Well, a deacon can eventually become an elder, but that actually denigrates the office of deacon to make it a mere stepping stone to the office of elder. The two offices are distinct, and so deacons should not be mere elders in training. Or you think of Toolbox Terrence, who's a really successful general contractor. He owns more tools than all the church combined. He knows his way around Home Depot. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's qualified to be a deacon. It's great if you have a deacon who's a handyman, but it's far more than that according to Scripture. Or Spreadsheet Sam. Let's think about a guy who is a financial wizard, and people in the church come to him and try to get free advice on the stock market or their financial portfolios. And you would think with all the administrative and practical concerns that touch on diaconal work that Spreadsheet Sam would be a perfect candidate. Not necessarily. The question is he biblically qualified for the office? Similarly, you think of Corporate Cliff. Corporate Cliff is a savvy businessman, and he's grateful for his pastor who went to seminary and has all these books and has a plaque on the office wall that apparently means that he mastered divinity at one point. But Corporate Cliff, he's a down-to-earth guy. He knows how to get stuff done. And that can be really helpful in a church, but that doesn't mean that the person is necessarily qualified to be a deacon. Just being having good business sense is not itself sufficient. Or Vito Vinny. Vito Vinny just kind of views it as his job to keep the pastor humble and to always impose a check and a balance on the pastor's decisions. That falls far short of what the Bible understands deacons to be and do. And lastly, and this is extremely common, we could call him pseudo-elder Steve. This is a deacon who is functioning like an elder, whether that's functioning as a shepherd over the whole church or as part of a kind of governing board of directors. This, too, is a very unhelpful way to understand the office of deacon, because when you have deacons functioning like elders, not only do you not have elders, you also don't have biblical deacons, and so you miss out on what God has for us in these two offices. So these are just a few ways that churches can get deacons wrong, but if we return to Scripture together, we'll see a biblical job description which will release deacons in our churches to serve and support the ministry of the whole.